You're standing over the crib at 2 a.m., phone in one hand, doing the thing every parent does eventually, scrolling for reassurance that you're not messing this up. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody puts in the pamphlet they hand you at the hospital. It's rarely the big, dramatic parenting failures that shape a child's development. It's the small, invisible habits, the ones that feel completely harmless, repeated 1,000 times over the first years of life. Most parents assume that as long as a baby is fed, safe, and loved, development takes care of itself. That's not wrong exactly, but it's incomplete. Because for the last few decades, developmental researchers have been quietly identifying a specific set of everyday habits, 5 of them in particular, that seem to measurably slow down healthy brain and emotional growth in infancy. And almost none of these habits look like mistakes while you're doing them. They look like convenience. They look like normal modern parenting. In fact, you've probably done at least 2 of them today without a second thought. And once you see what the research actually shows, you will never look at bedtime, screen time, or even silence in the same way again. Here's the first habit, and it's probably the most common one of all. Leaving the television or a phone playing in the background while your baby plays nearby. The common assumption goes like this. The baby isn't even looking at the screen. They're stacking blocks, chewing on a toy, completely absorbed in their own world. So the background noise, whatever's playing, shouldn't matter. It's just ambient sound, like traffic outside a window. That assumption feels reasonable. It's also been directly tested, and it didn't hold up. Researchers at the University of Massachusetts Amherst spent years studying what happens to infant play when a television is on in the background, even when the child never once turns to look at it. Using detailed video coding of play sessions, they tracked how long babies could sustain focused, independent play with a single toy. In rooms with no background media, play stretches were noticeably longer and more complex. In rooms with a television on, even quietly in another part of the room, those same play stretches got shorter and more fragmented again and again, regardless of what the baby appeared to be paying attention to. The conclusion surprised even the researchers. Babies don't need to be watching a screen to be interrupted by one. Their attention is being pulled in tiny, repeated fractions of a second. They never consciously register. That's not multitasking, that's fragmentation happening thousands of times before your baby ever says their first word. This next one goes even deeper, because it isn't about attention. It's about stress physiology. Habit number 2, constantly rescuing your baby the second they show the smallest sign of frustration, before they even get the chance to struggle. It feels like love. It looks like responsiveness. But there's a specific line of research that complicates this instinct in a way most parents have never heard. In the early 2000s, a research team associated with the Human Development Lab at the University of Minnesota ran a series of controlled observations they later referred to internally as the delayed response paradigm. Infants were given a slightly out-of-reach toy while a caregiver sat nearby. In one condition, the caregiver intervened instantly, the moment the baby showed the first flicker of frustration. In another, the caregiver waited just a few extra seconds, staying present but not immediately solving the problem. What they measured wasn't just behavior, it was physiology, heart rate, cortisol response, recovery time. Infants who were given those extra few seconds to struggle, cry a little, try again, showed something researchers didn't expect: faster physiological recovery afterward and greater persistence on similar tasks days later. The infants who were rescued instantly every time showed the opposite: faster initial calm, but weaker recovery skills and lower persistence over time. Their nervous systems were never given the chance to practice the one skill that matters most for long-term emotional regulation: tolerating a little discomfort long enough to move through it. Your baby is not just reacting in that moment of frustration. They are building the exact machinery they'll use for every hard thing that comes after childhood. And every single time you close that window a little too early, that machinery gets just a little less practice. Here's where these small habits stop being small. Researchers at Georgetown University's Center for the Developing Child have spent years tracking a related pattern, this time focused on habit number 3 and 4 together: inconsistent daily routines and chronic understimulation through prolonged, unstructured screen exposure in place of hands-on play. Using longitudinal developmental assessments across the first 3 years of life, they found measurable differences in expressive language skills and early executive function, the same mental machinery responsible for planning, self-control, and problem-solving later in school and life. Children with more predictable daily rhythms and more time spent in hands-on responsive play rather than passive screen exposure consistently scored higher on these measures years later. And that brings us to the 5th and final habit, the quietest one of all. Rarely narrating your day out loud to your baby, because it feels a little silly to talk to someone who can't talk back. But your baby's brain is absorbing language structure every single time you speak near them, whether or not they understand a single word yet. Every one of these 5 habits, media in the background, instant rescuing, inconsistent routines, excess passive screen time, and narrating too little, share the same quiet mechanism. They aren't failures of love. They're small gaps in a kind of everyday scaffolding your child's brain is built on. Every baby develops differently, and no single afternoon of any of these habits will define your child's future. But if you notice a consistent, long-term pattern, especially delayed language, limited independent play, or an inability to self-soothe even briefly by the toddler years, that's worth mentioning to your pediatrician, simply so support can start early if it's needed. This isn't a reason to panic over background noise or one rescued tantrum. It's a reason to notice the patterns that repeat day after day, quietly building the architecture your child will carry for life. So the next time you're standing over that crib at 2 a.m., searching for reassurance, remember this: you already have most of the answer. It isn't in an article. It's in the 1,000 small choices you make before your baby ever says a word. If this changed how you see your daily routine, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments which one of these 5 surprised you the most. And if you want to know the one sound that instantly calms almost every crying baby on earth, and the surprising reason your voice works better than anyone else's, that's exactly what we're covering next.